What's up? Welcome to the Confluence.VC podcast. This podcast is meant to give you a personal glimpse into the next era of investors and operators. This week we had on David from Intros AI. Intros AI helps automate introductions to help communities build stronger connections. We actually use their software with Confluence to help our community make more meaningful relationships. And Confluence Premium members can sign up for that service in the description below. In this talk, we cover what makes a great place to gather, differences between Web2 and Web3 communities, and similarities between choosing jobs and communities. All right, cool. David, appreciate you coming on. I know your time's valuable. I guess just to get started, we like to begin these talks just by learning a little bit more about yourself, path to where you got to where you are today. So with that, would love to hand over the mic to you and learn a little bit more about your background and specifically what you're working on today.
Absolutely. I love to start the story off with Gary Vaynerchuk, actually. If you know, Gary V is kind of the loud out there, controversial guy, but he brought me on as his first crypto hire about 4 years ago. And that's when I really started going deep on like online communities. I was working with a company called Roll, which makes social tokens for communities. The whole idea is you can almost capture the social value that these communities generate, and you can trade it. So you can trade like a Jay-Z coin for a Beyonce coin. Gary was one of the early investors there and needed someone to join him full time as his first crypto hire. So he brought me on. So I already worked with the team, had a good background there. And so I was 19 years old, got a call from Gary saying, "Hey, I need you to drop out of school and come join me as our first hire here." Joined him, was there for around 8 months before going back to school. But during that time, really learned a ton about the nuances of like how communities form online. One of the most wild things to me was you had this figure, this influencer, Gary, who has this audience that starts to form mini communities. So this Facebook group started popping up, like Gary fans in Austin or Gary fans in Czechoslovakia, like wherever it was. Like these groups came together, and what I found was that most of these communities form not because they actually loved Gary, but because the type of person that Gary's content curated. All right, so if you follow Gary, you're probably young, you probably have these big goals someday. You're maybe working 9 to 5, but you want to be working for yourself at some point. So it just so happens that Gary's content brings together these types of people who have so much in common. So I started thinking more about the way these formed, and they don't form through just everyone just joining a Discord or Slack. They form through people connecting with each other on existing platforms. So these messages, the DMs, right? The DMs are so special. People talk a lot about like Twitter DMs and how that's like the formation, and that's where real community happens. So I started understanding that, and eventually, fast forward a year or so, when the pandemic hit, I was hosting events and experiences and every week, brunches actually at University of Michigan when I was there, and when the pandemic hit, I wanted to maintain that level of intimacy that people had at brunches, and that paired up with my understanding of how online communities function made me realize there's a world where we can make one-on-one introductions between members of my own community. And we started that, me and my co-founder, Robert Levy. And after a few months of that, we saw other communities were manually making introductions between members of their communities using these massive spreadsheets. We saw the scenario where we could almost be this chief introduction officer for online communities. So to kind of tie it back all together, a lot of Gary's experience and working with him made me realize the value of building these online networks and how they form communities naturally, tied in with me hosting events and wanting to maintain that level of intimacy we had in person, led to this idea of, okay, let's make introductions between people. And then eventually let's help other communities and other online networks make introductions between their members.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, shameless plug for you guys. We use you. I've loved using you. I mean, our community's gotten a lot of value out of it. So anybody listening that needs to check you guys out should. I mean, we had this thought process pretty early on when we were starting Confluence, where like there are way too many Slack and Discord groups already that just kind of label themselves as communities. But if people aren't able to interact and form like at least one meaningful connection there, like community is really not doing its job, and you guys are filling in that missing piece. At least that's how I interpreted it. That's how we got like value out of it right away.
So glad. Thank you.
Also, like the phrase chief introduction officer. That's beautiful branding. But
Thank you. No, I remember we thought that one a little over a year ago now, and once we said that, people were like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's like, yeah, it's like, and especially if you think about the world being online, whether it's in a company or community, like, it just makes sense. Oh, it's going to be chief introduction officers, right? It's like their goal is to connect the right people in the organization together for whatever the goals they have and whatever the goals the organization has.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like an easy problem at first glance, but then as you scale, I mean, like our experience was that community, like for people joining when there's like 100 people versus like 1,800 people, it's a lot more intimidating in the latter. So like you need help to facilitate introductions and like have people do the right steps that you want in order for the community to stay valuable and for them to get value themselves. And again, it's just where you guys play in, and it's great service. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent there.
No, I'm so glad. No, I'm so laughing. Thank you so much for, like, I appreciate that. Appreciate it a lot. I mean, I think you're hitting on something interesting here, right? This idea of scale, and like what happens between that 20 person and 100 and 1,000 person community, and even for members, like this concept of psychological safety, like they feel so much less comfortable just DMing someone because the level of trust often goes down as a community grows. So I fully agree with everything you're saying here. I think you're hitting on a lot of core points.
Yeah, there's like a law of diminishing returns past like a certain point. And it's probably different for every community, but like we tried to map that out, and I mean that's been our takeaway as well. What are some things, like staying on the scaling topic? You obviously work with a ton of communities. What has been some of the secrets to communities that are able to scale and scale the right way? So like not just focusing on like member growth, but like not sacrificing engagement as number of members grow.
The larger a community gets, the more they focus on onboarding, the better. It's a really key one. If you think about joining a group chat of 10, 15 people, it's pretty easy to be like, hey, I'm David, gonna meet everyone here. But then you have 1,000 people and you join this. It's like, imagine walking to a party. It's like rave where no one. Everyone's just dancing their own way. There's little posses, little like cliques going on, and you're just the new girl or guy. And it's like, okay, there's no point of connection. But if you've onboarded, if you get brought in through friends who introduce you to everyone else, who say, hey, come to this event, I think you'll enjoy it. That's a much different experience than just being thrown into the mix. So as community scales, really focusing about the member experience. Their first touch point is huge, especially because usually members decide how active they're going to be in a community in the first 7 days. And that's the point when they decide, okay, is this one I'm going to keep coming back to or not? Is there immediate value I'm gaining from joining this community? Or is the value a little more nuanced and it's not very clear how long it'll take until I actually see my time turning into more meaning for me, more value for me in the form of connections or lessons learned. So the faster you can get someone to value and the faster you can show them that there's repetitive value coming to them every time they come back, that's when they build a habit to actually continue coming back. And the larger community is, the more intimidating it is. So I think you hit exact point there. You kind of mentioned it earlier. This idea of being almost afraid of like these massive people that don't know you and don't know your context.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's been our biggest takeaway as well. It's just like, if you're not able to onboard effectively, then like you're filling up a leaky bucket, essentially. Like you have a churn issue where you're just gonna have to continue to get new members. Like new ones aren't gonna stick around. I think the challenge that we've had is as we've added on like additional layerings, whether it's like intros or like different components of deal flow or just other parts of the community and like features that our members get, is just tougher to communicate that so that people are like aware of everything while also like getting value out of it. But I totally agree. I mean, onboarding is like the biggest thing. And it seems like a lot of people just kind of skip over that and expect for magic to happen without like any education.
Especially, yeah, exactly, right. I think the other piece too is how to, you constantly want to ask yourself, how do I make this community feel smaller for my members? So one way of doing that is cohorts. On Deck, I think, is really pioneering in that front. Morning Brew does a really good job of this. They have an accelerator. So cohorts are really, really powerful in that it's like it's a group of people who during the first 2-3 months, they're all onboarding together. They're going through the same shared experience and no one knows each other. It's like equivalent of a freshman dorm, right? It's like everyone's bumping into each other. They're like, oh, like, they want to meet because there is no such thing as an insider group at that point in time. So cohort lets you find your group and then onboard to the larger overall network or community. So I think cohorts is also becoming much more popular of a model. I'd also say one way is also just a paywall. Sounds a little more almost counterintuitive. It's like, oh, why do you want to turn away? But if you have a paywall or some reason to buy in, then those who do buy in are much more active. And if they're more active, they provide more value to other members. And if they provide more value to other members, then the community starts to almost run itself in a way where someone joins and then rather than you or someone else who's a Confluence, so being the person who is doubling down and improving the community, you let members themselves improve it. And that's a big jump of like, conceptual value add. It's like, where's the value coming from? If the value is coming from each other, then the overall value of the entire community, scales exponentially.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. And I actually had a conversation around this for like pricing with somebody yesterday. Because ours is paid, we're probably going to continue to raise prices. Just like the goal of any business, like very few businesses out there are able to play the volume game well, meaning like they just continue to get smaller amounts of money from larger amounts of people. Like as a business owner, you would rather get larger amounts of money from smaller groups of people. Like that's B2B sales essentially. If you can do it without the long sales cycle, then bingo. But yeah, I totally agree. Like the pricing component, just having like that additional friction for getting people in, like it should in theory keep out bad actors, attract ones that are more serious, and then they have more incentive to show up every day. Like it's tough to have that incentive. It's just like free, anybody can join.
Totally. Yep. Exactly.
So you guys obviously have looked at a lot of different communities, especially over the like last 5 to 10 years. It seems like communities in general have evolved a lot during that time period. What have you noticed of, I guess, Web2 communities versus Web3 communities, or just like how communities have evolved over the last half decade?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the obvious turning point, of course, is COVID, right? Where the concept of a relationship being started online became a lot more comfortable. Not just more comfortable, but necessary. So as the idea of a connection or a relationship online being a more important connection to you than someone in real life started becoming more normalized, the idea of a community online being your first, most important community you're part of also became more normalized. And when that happens, that means people are starting to look at their online community as a place where not only do they spend the most time, but that's where they get the support. That's where they get their sense of belonging. It's where they find their new friends, and that's where they have trust and they ask for advice. So when this happens, the transition happens from being IRL to online. It is just this mental transfer of, okay, these types of communities I'm a part of also can start transferring from IRL to online. And when that happens, of course, these other related questions arise, which is, now I spend so much time online, how do I interact? How do I earn from being a member of this community? How do I, can I make money that way? Or can I even participate and how do I show status in these online networks? And that's when, thinking logically about more in your life spent in this way, it makes a lot of sense why NFTs start popping off around 6-8 months into COVID. It makes a lot of sense why these social DAOs give ownership of the community itself to the members, because otherwise, with all these other networks that they can participate in, why participate in yours? And the answer is, well, if you have ownership over it, if there's a return, if you have governance and say in what the future of that community looks like, that is an incredibly powerful tool to like galvanize not just engagement, but this sense of identity tied to a community that Web2 communities don't have the same advantage over.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I kind of have that. So we're like by definition Web2, like don't really have any Web3 components. But I saw exactly what you were saying like a few months back, where like I think over the next handful of years, the communities that are going to win out are going to be the ones where members are able to earn as being part of the community. And like, I think there are ways to help members earn in Web2 communities. And like we played around with different ones like that, whether it's like referral based system or something else like that. But it's just not necessarily as straightforward from an ownership perspective. It's just like gets a little bit messy. We've tried to think about it and lay it all out, but yeah, I don't know. It's pretty interesting to think about like the idea that you can get side income just by like doing what you've already been doing, just by hanging out in these different communities and adding value that way. Because up until this point, like that hasn't really been an option. Like you've had like people have participated for different reasons. But yeah, it's interesting talk, like really interesting, like second order effects of that.
Yeah, and I still think, again, end of the day, you could still make a lot of money and still have a really engaged and dedicated community in Web2. Like there isn't an existential like upper hand that Web3 has in all communities, right? So especially if the backing of the community is around like a fund, for example. So like we work with First Round and Contrary Capital as a fund too. It's like very similar where they have a fellowship where because their members get to connect, it leads to also deal flow for the fund. And the more people have an identity associated with it, the more that likely they're going to be saying, hey, like to their friends, hey, you should join the community and let them write a check to you. So there's also this idea of a community-led funds, which is starting. I think that's very powerful as well. Where like the benefit to maybe members who bring in someone to get investment, maybe they get a little bit of carry, and so it's like it's almost like you almost have all these scouts, right? They maybe get a little carry, and then maybe from the partners or the fund itself benefit is like they back and pay for all these things that the community does because they know that long term will pay off because they'll have the best deal flow. So there are other models out there that aren't inherently Web3, but act very much like Web3 communities or have the very same like components where like incentives are very similar to what a Web3 community incentives might be.
Yeah, it's like more taking like a longer term view of it.
Exactly. It's like Web 2.5, right? It's not such a hard cut.
Yeah, exactly. I think in the future, people are going to start looking at what communities to join, similar to how they look at what jobs to take. Because like today, it's really based on like growth potential and like maybe job opportunities that you're going to find there that you're not going to find online. But I think you should also factor in earning ability in the future and like maybe ownership or whatever else you're prioritizing. But today and in the past, like that hasn't necessarily been a consideration, but I think that might change. And like as these more tools pop up to make that possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I haven't seen like that before. It's a really, really good take of like, communities joining a community being akin to the thought process of joining a job and really vetting it and applying to a lot and then saying like, oh, like, across all these, seems like I got the job here. Great. And the reason I think it's also super interesting is like, when you're saying I'm joining a community, it's not just saying, oh, like I'm gonna try this thing out. It's like, it really means like I am committing to the identity that this community has. And I'm committing to the network that this community will enable me to tap into, which is really a large part of what you ask for in a job, right? And as hopefully as the economy gets better, as people don't have to be stressed out about, who knows what the world's looking like in a couple of years, but the hope is that folks will be able to, the average income will rise, or at the very least, like people can, the world progresses to the point where you don't have to worry as much about the most like base level human needs. And in that scenario, the question of who you surround yourself with and the questions of what do you identify with? What is your almost, pseudo religion? What do you subscribe to? Like that question becomes more and more important as the rest of our life gets abstracted away.
Yeah, 100%. So you guys just raised some money. You're going to talk about more about the raise a little bit, and then what those funds are going towards in the next 18, 24 months?
You got it. Let's dive in. So we raised 1.3 million, brought it in pretty recently. Really excited about. We have Neo, who backed Ramp and Bubble, so our main lead there. Also had a bunch of participation from our network of angels, from Saram Krishnan, who's a GP at A16Z. So he put a check in, as well as a few other smaller angels. My past boss, the head of investments with Gary V, put a check in as well. So whole range of folks. We really see our ecosystem around us like a community, and we want to treat it as such. So right, it's like if you think about the things that make a company succeed or fail, a lot of it comes down to network. It's like, can you get in the door of the right clients? Can you meet the right investors? So treating your ecosystem like a community, I think, is the right mindset to be in. We're really planning to put that almost all towards hires, right? So we just brought on our last growth hire. It's been like our pseudo head of community, if you will. We also have a handful of part-time engineers and ecosystem around us, where once we raise our seed, hopefully in the next, I'd say probably raising seed in about a year from now. Once we go for that, because we just do a pre-seed, once we go for that, that's when we'll bring on everyone part-time on full-time. So we're trying to curate the future hires around us as well. And then, so I think it covers a few of the investors we have. Behind Genius is another investor, as well as Seed Club Ventures, which is a DAO. Really excited about them. And the last thing there is, it's the next 18, 24 months. So really doubling down on, we see the vision of Intros being like, first, the chief introduction officer, right? And then the next beyond that, it's what does the chief experience officer look like? Not just for one-on-ones, but for group matching, and for saying, hey, you 3 or 4 people get together for an online game, or hey, so there's a whole variety of experiences where we want to explore and think deeper about. So we're going to be doing a lot more experiments there. We also need to start experimenting more in the experimenting more with just different business models, right? I think we're really excited about this idea of typical SaaS, right? And charging communities directly. It'd also be great if at some point maybe we could help community managers make money. So there's a lot of questions we're still ironing out, and I think that's what this phase of the company is for. But really excited about it. Really comes down to validating and de-risking at each step along the way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you guys start thinking through ways to help community managers make money, I'm all ears. For growing as well, if you guys haven't already checked this out, I'm about to shoot you over a link. We have you heard of Hive Index?
No, please tell me.
So I just shot it over in the chat. This guy, Fed, essentially created this massive online directory of online communities. We actually had him on the pod a couple months back. Awesome dude, and does this as a side gig. But I was thinking this could be a great hit list for you guys of like different communities to target that could obviously see some value and use an Intros.
Oh, this is huge. Wow. No, I'm looking at it right now. This is a great idea. Yeah, man, absolutely. I'll make a note of that. I'll definitely have to reach out.
Yeah. Check them out. If you want an intro to Fed as well, just let me know. Happy to bridge the gap.
Thank you. Absolutely. I'll reach out.
Cool. You want to run through quick fire questions?
Let's do it.
All right. First one we got, what's a recommendation you hear regularly that you think is bad advice?
Ooh, there's a lot of bad advice out there. What's the idea? It's total aside that the idea, it's like if you listen to all the advice in the world, it'll all zero out to like it'll all like add up to zero. Like it's back and forth. This is a funky one. It actually relates back to when you build a community for your product. So like community-led companies, and just thinking about the whole idea is to give a community and build a product around them. A lot of folks say either, so I think the earlier you start, the better is what they say. I think it makes sense. I think it's one of two options because you only have so many resources. So either you start off with the community and then you build a product around, or you like wait until you have like some product and then you start building a community around that. I think there's a funky like timing piece to it because too many people will start a community, but then because they don't realize how much time it takes to actually manage and make an active community, it'll just die off. So I'd say when you're going to start a community, make sure you actually have the resources and time to put into it. Like for us, like we're still like in the next couple months, we're likely going to do it. But until now, we very intentionally haven't started a community, which is very anti-typical community thought. But you have to understand that like as a 2 or 3, 4 person team, now we have 5, it's incredibly hard to like dedicate the resources to make an active, strong community. So when you're starting one, know what you're getting yourself into. I think is the biggest thing. It's not just something you just start.
It's a full-time job. I
mean,
like you can't, like you got to water it every day. You got to do maintenance. Like you got to do all sport tickets yourself. Like it's not just something where you can like turn it on, forget about it. And
exactly.
Let's see. Next one we got in the last year, what new belief, behavior, habit has most improved your life?
Oh, nice. I don't have it on right now, but I've been using Oura Ring a lot. That's been big. I've also used this product called LogSeek. It's very similar to Roam Research. That's really changed the way I like document and write things down. It shows a lot more. It's like an interconnected web. You can reference other page within pages. It's a really, really powerful tool. That's been really big. But usually 3 things I like to do each day. I like to 10 minutes of meditation, at least 10, 15 minutes or so of journaling, and then like some form of workout. I think as long as I do those, like life is fine. I think this past year has been much worse on the side of like habits as it typically was. I have these like reports I send out to like friends of mine where every 3 months or so I'll send like a David update where it's just like how I'm doing all my habits because I track every day the amount of time I spend on each one. So I think just tracking more is like a really, really useful one.
Yeah, totally agree. What is one piece of advice you'd give to somebody starting a company today?
I'd say you can find at least
one. That's probably the toughest question we ask.
Yeah, no, that's a good one though. One is like find the person that like you could see yourself working with for years. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? Like just start working on it. Me and my co-founder Rob started working on projects about 3 years ago now. And we built about 4 or 5 products until and it's iterating and pivoting, and we did this at night after our full-time jobs. And at some point we realized, okay, we actually have something here. We validation, we have like potential clients. That's when I went full-time, and he went full-time a few months later. And then we raised, about 9 months after that. So I would just start with someone you want to build with. No need to do it alone unless like, you feel like you have unless you do it, you can do it alone. It's just like, I wouldn't recommend it. And then when you do find that person, just start working on things. You just get an excuse to start building, see how it goes, and just keep iterating, sacrifice those nights when you would otherwise be going out or watching Netflix. So it's totally worth the sacrifice.
Yeah. Long-term gains, long-term people.
Yes, sir. You got it.
If you had one ask for our listeners, what would it be?
We just entered public beta. We got mentioned on Forbes. We have a whole article on that. You should check it out. I think the biggest thing is, if you run or are part of other communities that I think could be a good fit for intros. You want to make introductions between members, reach out. Just David at intros.ai or Twitter. I'm at the brunch guy. I host a lot of brunches. It's kind of my thing I'm really into outside and semi-related to intros, but I've done it for years. So if you're in New York, reach out as well. I'll invite you to a brunch. Yeah.
You have like a sign-up link for the public beta?
I do, yes. It's right on the site, intros.ai.
Okay.
I'll drop it in the chat here, but you can just get started. And even if you are a member and want to join a community, we're starting a wait list for folks so we can start directing them to communities to join.
Yeah, that'll be cool. But yeah, man, if you got here, I'll pull this link up. Sweet. Yeah, I'll link this when we share this out, just to hopefully drive some more traffic.
Perfect. All right. Sounds good.
Cool, man. That's all the questions I got, but this has been great.
Clay, you're the man. This is great. I really, really love like the questions you asked, and B, like some of the insights. Thanks again for sharing all the nuances of how you thought about making your community.
Yeah, man, 100%. Really appreciate you coming on. I'll let you get back to it. And yeah, if you ever need any like feedback, anything else, I'm an email away.
Amen. All right. Thanks, so. See ya.
All right, brother. Huge thanks again to David for coming on this week. We hope that each of you were able to pick up something valuable from this talk. If you're looking to get in touch with David, we've linked his social as well as the company URL within the description below. Feel free to ping him. And if you got a community, would highly recommend checking them out to supercharge that community. For next steps, if each of you have not submitted your info to become a member yet, you can do that through our website at www.Confluence.VC. And also, if you want to become a subscriber to the newsletter, we offer a ton of free resources in there each and every week meant to help you become better at your individual roles. You can subscribe there at www.confluence.substack.com. Hope that helps. Hope to hear from y'all soon.